to you with another video from a hotel room while I'm on military orders. I uh I kind of didn't intend upon doing a video, which I have at least for a while. I have a few videos in the pipeline which I sure are coming, but I have had a lot come up in my life. But I was scrolling through Reddit, which I occasionally do that, just to kind of peer into the deepest, darkest depths of humanity, which I know Reddit has. At least it's a glimpse into it. And it does have a lot of, let's just say, hedonistic elements that I don't know, I'm intrigued with the human, human will, the human depravity. But then I came upon this article on r/monarchism. I believe that's where I saw it. I don't know, I saved this link and I was going to come back to it later, and I read it this afternoon of the March of Germany's extreme monarchists, which I was like, uh, really? Because this is the first I'm hearing of it, and I'm ethnically Bavarian German, so I try to keep up to tabs as much as I can with what's happening in the fatherland, but this is the first I'm hearing of extreme monarchists in Germany. But I just wanted to go over this article since I just found it completely ludicrous the first time I was going through it. Which, by the way, I absolutely love this painting of Kaiser Wilhelm II that whoever made this article chose to put up there because it is superb. Um, so whoever wrote this article, a woman, well, a cartoon of woman, I guess, because she's a cartoon journalist, like all of them. Katja Hoyer, I'm guessing she's ethnically German or one of those corrupted Germans, but I digress. So the far right in Germany isn't all angry young men with shaved heads, baseball bats, and black boots. There are those who appear respectable, even intellectual. The Reichsbürger community movement includes accountants, teachers, and academics. Many members are middle-aged. It's a fractured network with vastly divergent worldviews, or Weltanschauungs, if you're writing this for a German audience, which I'm assuming she's not writing this for a German audience. I'm assuming she's writing it for the American regime, essentially, because we all know that Germany is just a colony of the American Empire, a tributary state. But she goes on, united in their belief that the current government is illegitimate, which I would I would frankly agree because there has been no legitimate government in Germany since 1918. And I can say this not just from my own intellectual findings, but even from the testament. Well, this is secondhand testament that I've heard from my grandfather of his grandfather, who was a officer in the First World War. Um, and I mean, I come from a long Bavarian lineage, which is possibly aristocratic. I mean, I'm almost certain that it is. Um, of course, when you come to America, you have to get rid of any nobility. So, I mean, I can see every time I look up records, I always see Von, Von, Von. So I'm like, yeah, we're aristocratic, even though a lot of my family denied. But I digress. That's just me boasting there of things that are hard to claim these days. So the Reichsbürger community claims that the German Empire was now legally abolished, true, and when it collapsed at the end of the First World War, and it therefore continues to exist, which I don't say it continues to exist, but I would say there is no such thing as a legitimate government over Germany since its collapse. Which it mostly collapsed from within. It was mostly traitorous ranks within Germany, not necessarily, let's just say, a popular mass movement like the populist delusion that people try to proclaim it to be. So, to them, the so-called November Revolution of 1918, in which Kaiser Wilhelm II was forced to abdicate, ended the German monarchy. It was a coup without legal basis, which it was. It was a legal coup. Um, I mean, not legal coup, it was an illegal coup, but it was illegal. I mean, it's like 10 at night, guys. I'm having to respond to this bullshit. But the government that followed, beginning with the Weimar Republic and ending with today's parliamentary democracy, yeah, because just parliamentary democracy, you're not going to call it the Bundesrepublik like its official name is the evil American occupational government called the Bundesrepublik. Um, but have no right to exist, which they don't. Weimar had no right to exist. The Bundesrepublik has no right to exist. Today's Bundestag can therefore be overthrown without qualms, even with violence if necessary. I mean, I would prefer without violence, but if a illegitimate government is governing your state, well, then, I mean, there's only certain measures that should be taken. Um, while this kind of extremism is still rare, and I'm not advocating for violence, YouTube, I'm not advocating for it. In fact, I just said that I don't prefer violence. In fact, I've been in the military. I know what violence looks like. That's why I don't prefer not to use it unless it must. But that's in a hypothetical world, not in reality. As long there has long residual monarchism in Germany. Around 10% of Germans support the restoration of the royals. I hear it's actually more these days. I hear it's more like 1 in 6. Which then I saw other polling saying that like Gen Z up to like 30-year-olds, like millennials, about 1/3 would prefer the restoration of the monarchy. But clearly this journalist doesn't really care for accurate statistics. She wants to make it look fringe, so she says, "Oh, just 10%, 1 in 10 Germans are monarchist." But then she says later, among those under 34, that number is nearly 1 in 5. So she's saying it's 20%, which is close kind of to the 1/3 that I've seen in other polling. Um, which I wish I had the articles here, but I just remember seeing it time and time again. It's roughly 1/3 of the German youth, the Junge, who want the uh, the Kaiserreich back. Because quite frankly, what is democracy good for? Nothing. Elizabeth R. Arrested last month. Ah, yes, this was the German woman that was arrested. I wish I would have found that article for it, but yeah, it was some German woman in Saxony. 75, and the German federal police of the illegal German government arrested her for um, supposed conspiracy against the German state, which, because of essentially every German state always proclaims its absolute infallibility and its right to exist, even illegitimate ones like the Bundesrepublic. So they cannot tolerate any deviation, even from just average citizens. That's why you're not allowed to raise your right arm in a very specific salute in Germany, or else get imprisonment because it goes against the ideology of parliamentary democracy. Um, but let's continue. So yeah, she was arrested last month by state police. It was already a month ago. I could have swore that happened sooner. But is alleged to be one of those extremist Reichsbürgers, and of course she puts extremist. It's this extremist. You're extreme if you don't like liberal democracy. You're extreme for not liking seeing your entire nation destroyed by entropy and by the human just absolute debauchery and just ugh. Yeah, it's just and you're not allowed to question it. You're not allowed to question the system. Not at all. Um, she she is not how you imagine a terrorist to be. A 75-year-old retired teacher with shoulder-length white hair, pictured carrying her belongings in a brown potato bag. She is accused of plotting to overthrow the incumbent government to restore the German monarchy. Which, based woman, if all these things are true, that is just based. Like, there's nothing there's nothing less based about that. Um, but yeah, I mean, the Bundesrepublik know they're illegitimate, so they have to stamp down on any claims to their illegitimacy, even by a 75-year-old woman, a grandmother. She probably has like what 10. 10 to 20 grandkids. I know Germany doesn't have the highest birth rate, but I mean, America doesn't either. So 10 to 12 grandkids is kind of realistic. But it's like, yeah, so they just arrested a grandma. Great. Prosecutors say she's head of a terrorist cell of Reichsbürgers called the United Patriots that attempted to procure weapons and explosives. I am calling bullshit on that. That is some deep bullshit. Um, I mean, it would also be based, but it's bullshit. I don't believe a single accusation by by the German Bundesrepublik. One of her alleged co-conspirators, a 54-year-old accountant named Savan B. Savan B. Yeah, of course, not putting the last names in there. Was arrested in April when police found an SS uniform and a AK-47 in the cellar. Okay, I'm not a fan of the SS. I mean, they had good drip, but that was about the only thing that they had. I, I mean, but though, I kind of, I'm not saying I like the SS, but not everybody in the SS was evil, if that makes sense. It's kind of like, well, imagine if America was invaded tomorrow and the let's just say China or Russia, and they're doing like a post-American like regime, essentially they do a Nuremberg trial essentially, and they pull up every member of like the Republican Party and Democratic Party on war crimes and crimes against humanity because I quite frankly the invasion of Iraq was a crime against humanity. But but they know that like the low level like member of the Republican or Democratic Party are not intrinsically evil. In fact, most people just do what they're told. There'll be no Democrat or Republican Party, and but the major party leadership will be prosecuted in like a trial. So like that's how those things go. It's like same with like if the FBI was all going to be hounded up and arrested, it's like, most of the agents wouldn't really be able to be convicted on anything because they're mostly just following orders. And they didn't really endorse any evil ideology, but it'd be like the men at the top who are, and the people who are in like the managerial positions who probably would be, just in a hypothetical. But it's like that's the same thing with the SS. It's like, the average, the average, trooper, I guess. I'm forgetting SS ranks off the top of my head besides like high ranking officers. Like high ranking officers were punished, but even down to like to the lowest prison guard, like there's been fanatical attacking of them, but it's like, the SS was a paramilitary group. Kind of like kind of like imagine if SWAT team was like nationalized. That's kind of what their role was, a national police force. So you're persecuting policemen at that point. And like some of them were actually soldiers as well in the Waffen SS, which I'm not saying a lot of them were actually the more fanatical soldiers, but there were a lot of ones that were just more normal people. When questioned by police, he admitted plotting to abduct the health minister Karl Lauterbach, the architect of Germany's lockdown policies. Plans have been drawn up that include the potential need of killing members of Lauterbach's security details, Lauterbach's security detail. Next, the group would have formally declared the restoration of the German Constitution of 1871. um, the latter portion of that is based. I mean, abducting an illegitimate minister. I mean, I don't endorse it. I don't endorse it. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say for YouTube censors. Um, but the restoration of the 1871 Constitution. I mean, I've read through the 1871 German Imperial Constitution. Um, I think that honestly it's a little too liberal. If you were going to restore the old Imperial Constitution, you'd kind of want to redact some things in there that allows for cuck democracy in, which was kind of the spirit of the age, which Bismarck unfortunately had to do, but he controlled the democracy back then. He was the gatekeeper. Now there is no gatekeepers in the German democracy. So, finally, the plan involved countrywide blackouts brought about by attacks on the national electrical grid. Well, hell, the United States is already doing that. I mean, literally, State Department funding the Green Party to shut down German nuclear reactors and make them so so sufficient, so not self-sufficient, but sufficient on Russian gas, American German coal power plants that can't even produce like enough electricity and stuff and all that for German industry. In fact, we are probably going to be seeing the Morgenthau plan happening in 2022 at this rate. Thank you, State Department. I think this was intentional. This was definitely intentional. The idea was to create chaos and cut the population off from the media so that the new German government can begin its work Im impeded, works unimpeded. Savan B assumed that parts of the police and the army would supportive of this plan, which they would. They would. I mean, maybe not the police to the same extent, but the military definitely. The Bundestag is kind of like I kind of view it as like the Reichswehr of the modern age, where it has like a lot of these right-wing elements within Germany. They tend to join the Bundestag because it's kind of, I mean, you can't keep right-wingers from joining the military. It's just natural, especially ones that are monarchist and more, let's just say, anti-democratic, because the military is a very anti-democratic institution, even if they claim to be, democratic, yada yada. But after spending 3 years in the military, like it's not democratic, and that's fine. I respect rank. I respect men that earn their positions. That I respect that chivalry, the codes of honor, even though the United States has very little codes of honor within its armed forces. You mostly only see that in the upper echelon, and not in the upper echelons, in the special operations community to a small degree. I mean, America has a very degenerate military, from what I've also discovered with my own eyes. But she goes on, it's an idea that isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. A few years ago, a group of German commandos was banned. This was the KSK, the German Special Forces. I believe it was an entire company. Um, yeah, it was disbanded when a far-right sergeant major was discovered. I love how they use the term far right. Oh, he's a far-right conspiracist discovered with SS song sheets and thousands of rounds of ammunition buried in his garden. I'm guessing that the SS song sheets are honestly plants. If I had to guess anything, they're probably plants on the guy, just to try to get prosecution, like the legality behind it, essentially behind his arrest. He had a plan, in quotation, said the parliamentary commissioner for the armed forces at the time, and he is not the only one. Savan B wanted to be sure that Vladimir Putin too was on his side. He admitted contacting the Russian president, but wasn't sure if his message had gotten through. Elizabeth R., who was known as the Countess in the movement, was supposedly destined for a role in this new government. I mean, okay, Putin. That'd be funny. Like that'd just be like Putin trolling if he did like, no, the Bundesrepublik illegitimate. Not talking to you guys anymore. We only recognize Kai, Kaiser Friedrich the would he be the fourth? I think he'd be the fourth. Kaiser Friedrich the fourth, aka George Friedrich, Prince of Prussia, um, which he is the current heir. Um, but there are other monarchist groups that lobby for the restoration of the Hohenzollern dynasty that once ran the country. One, E- Ewiger Bund, make, makes its own passports in a pre-1914 style based, which it then attempts to get stamped by members of the old aristocratic families to gain citizenship of a lost imperial Germany. That is so based. Like that is honestly like developing parallel institutions. Like you develop parallel institutions um to essentially replace the illegitimate ones that rule them now. Many see George Friedrich, Prince of Prussia, and great great grandson of Kaiser Wilhelm II. She left out his title, of course, because she probably doesn't respect Kaiser Wilhelm II. as the only legitimate ruler of the country. Honestly, based. I love Prince George Friedrich. He's a very let's just say he holds up to the name Frederick. Because every Frederick tended to be a very stoic, very simple man, very down to earth. Unlike the Wilhelms, which would tend to be very well, Wilhelm the First was he wasn't as flamboyant, but Frederick Wilhelm before that, like they tended to be very flamboyant, very romantic. Wilhelm the Second was very romantic. I use that in its classical definition, of course. Elements within Germany have long been susceptible to the esoteric biodynamic uh, agriculture, which can involve practices. That's such a word salad. Like what? I mean, yes, it's there is esoteric monarchism, but I don't know. Like the Germans, they feel it. Like in America, you have to kind of be an esoteric monarchist because well, we don't have a history of that. We have a history of literally religious republicanism. So if you're a monarchist, you are fundamentally against the current system. Um, and you're kind of against every, even like the state religion that and the state myth around around America. But in Germany, it's like, they can point to it's like 1918. Like they had an empire, they had an emperor, they had monarchs in every single province. Every province had their historical dynasty. It's very well felt there. Um, so which can involve practices such as burying bull horns full of quartz next to crops. Oh my God, I mean that's probably true, but it's probably done by like the neo-pagans in Germany. Um, has its largest following in Germany. Many former East Germans still believe that HIV is a man-made virus from from a disinformation campaign run by the Stasi and KGB in the 1980s. I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. Like honestly, that could be true. Like that I wouldn't doubt it if it was actually a man-made virus. Um, Other more seditious elements have adopted parts of the American QAnon philosophy, mixing COVID conspiracies with theories about the secret global government. Some believe that that Donald Trump's death destiny to return uh, destiny to free Germany from supposed foreign occupation, allowing Germany to abolish parliamentary democracy. Which, yes, every single American base there is an occupational base. The fact that American soldiers can get away with German women, marry them, take them back to the States, how's Germany not a colony? Just how? And it's like we are going to force, let's just say, non-ethnic Europeans upon the German population, essentially, force them upon them, integrate them, make them stay there for 3 years before rotating out for another soldier, who's just going to colonize Germany further. Same with all like the State Department stuff, same with all the economic interests and tyings and agreements and force pacts too. Like there's a lot of things that you could consider you can consider Germany as a colony, which I do, of America. And it was since 1945. Which I won't Adolf Hitler's regime was not legitimate, but it was still it was still Germany defending itself against international plutocracy, just like the First World War was. Um, and the First World War was kind of like the first plutocratic domination of the world. But let's continue on. According to the 2020 survey, more than half of voters of the far right AFD, or Alternative for Deutschland, believe that the world is controlled by secret powers, as do 45% of non-voters. Yeah, I mean, it's not a conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy when people can see it, when people can feel that it is true. I mean, feeling that is true, there, I mean, there was a school of thought where honestly intuition was considered by the ancients as one of the most important fields of knowledge because your intuition is your primordial instinct telling you something is wrong that or something is not true, that something else might be the truth, and that you know that your leaders are not truly in charge, is that intuition telling you, like, if 45% of non-voters in Germany believe that, same with like half of a political party, I bet that's the same with other political parties in Germany too. Like, I maybe not like the SPD or the CDU because they're pretty plucked liberals, like boomers mostly. But I digress. But the AFD now leads the polls in eastern parts of the country and is the fourth largest nationally. With 15%, not all of its voters subscribe to conspiracy theories, but the party often panders to such fears. So, this is an example. There's a conspiracy against AFD. There's a conspiracy in Germany against having a true right-wing party in the government. Because as of the last German election, like the center-right parties could have formed a coalition with the AfD. If they would have, they would have the government. But they chose not to. They chose not to because they're not allowed to. AfD is anathema. I mean, De Linke is the same way. De Linke is not allowed into government because it's the far left. Which is funny in Germany. Like, liberals like to have this horseshoe theory, which it is kind of true in this case where the far left and the far and like the quote unquote far right. I don't consider the AfD far right. Um, but the Linke and AfD tend to vote the same in the German parliament because they tend to vote against liberal policies proposed by the liberal government in Germany. And they tend to actually be more German centric, unlike the other parties, which tend to be more German phobic. Um, so, I mean, horseshoe theory kind of confirmed there, but if it was only De Linke and the AfD in the German parliament, yeah, or let's just say it was only farther right-wing parties and farther left-wing parties in the German parliament, they would not be voting the same. They'd be they'd be completely trying to kill each other essentially, which that's how German politics always have. And of course, she's gonna include she's gonna include a quote from Kirsten Poditz, a spokeswoman for the far left party Die Linke in Saxony, has argued that the authorities are still underestimating the problem of these extreme monarchists. Extreme monarchists. It's extreme to want the monarchy back, right? She she's right, but there are problems with how the German state reacts to dissidents. So the journalist has her bias. I mean, you can hear it all through this article. But now she just says it. It's like, yeah, the monarchists are extremists. It's like, okay, lady, okay, overpaid. What is that? Is an Anglo-German historian? Anglo-German. Yeah, I'm going to call into doubt your actual loyalty to your own ethnic group. According to the Constitution ratified in 1949, by the way, by the American occupational government, was forced upon the Germans, but any attempt to change the country's political framework is prohibited, and the so-called eternity clause enshrined an unchanging constitution, which I mean that just kind of shows you the maliciousness of the Bundesrepublik. You are not allowed. You're not allowed to advocate for political change. It is unconstitutional. And they'll beat you over the head with the Constitution. I mean, I see German politicians use this all the time. They say, well, the reason why they always give to target dissidents is because they don't support the Constitution. They don't support the German state, essentially. They don't support the state that rules over them. Um, and they always make an appeal to the Constitution and to democracy. But I digress. Which has led to Konit's own Socialist Party coming under investigation by the security services, which I mean, if it was like say the imperial government inspecting Die Linke, I'd greatly support it. The AfD is being monitored on suspicions of counter-constitutional behavior. Yeah, well, honestly, I hope they are counter-constitutional. For those inclined towards conspiratorial thinking, strict policing of politics confirms their fears about the state, which it does. It does confirm their fears about the state. because the German state is against them. The Buddhist Republic is not the friend of the Germans. It is the friend of the American of the global American empire. Which I know that there's some American right wingers that I associate with don't like that term GAE or the gay. Um, but I use it because honestly, I've seen it firsthand from the within the American state. It is a gay state. I see it firsthand all the time, and I'm not afraid to use it because it is true. Um, but repression risks turning the weird into the dangerous. I mean, she she calls it weird. She calls it weird to be a monarchist. She this woman just claims to be the arbiter of truth. I mean, that's what all journalists claim to be. Oh, they're the arbiters of truth. They're the gatekeepers of information. They are the ones who are truly informed and informed, enlightened, all knowing, the whole shebang. But then and they claim their own infallibility all the time. Which, in their own worldview, like I'll admit this, in their own worldview, they are correct. But outside their worldview, they are incorrect. And that's because they can't accept worldviews that are essentially not their own. I mean, that's what Adolf Hitler wrote in Mein Kampf about Weltanschauungs. It is like a religious position, a worldview you cannot negotiate with other worldviews. It is not like political parties fighting in an election. It is like the zeal of early Christianity. It is it is like the zeal of early Islam. Like you don't tolerate the outsider. You don't tol you don't tolerate your enemy. You kill him. And that's what this journal says. I mean, she would rather see all monarchists in Germany just destroyed, gone, shebang, destroyed. Well, then people like me would much rather see the monarchists succeed and actually become a dominant political force within Germany. So hopefully I can return to my own fatherland and leave this hellscape. I mean, even though the German monarchy would probably have to line up with Russia, I'd say, in such a world alignment, which is, I'm not the biggest fan of Putin, but at least he gives an alternative to the GIE. But that is it for tonight. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I know it's probably long and rambly, but I have a lot on my mind whenever I come upon these topics, and I can't kind of like stop my commenting because that I kind of like can't read that much when it comes to like articles and journals, especially by people I fundamentally disagree with. And I'll just go on a tangents. I'll like have to stop every line and just critique every single line. So it's kind of like the most inefficient way to read. But thank you guys for listening. This is Darth Kilhoun signing off.